everyone. Welcome to VistaView Solutions Q&A Cafe. Today is part one of our types of data uploads in SAP ByDesign with your host, Alex Waddell. He'll be going over transactional data today. As always, my name is Catherine, and I'll be your host today, or I'll be, your facilitator today. Alex will, of course, be our host. Of course, we'll be recording this session, so everyone will remain on mute, and then the recording will be sent out next week. As per usual, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type them into the questions or chat box window at any time, and we'll answer them towards the end of the presentation. And then don't forget to join us for next week. We're going to go into part two of our project management series, Order to Cash in Project-Based Services. We'll be going over master data. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Alex.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everybody. So yeah, welcome to this edition of Q&A Cafe. Thank you for joining us. I will try and we'll be talking, it's actually going to be part one of a two-part series. So I've split this into two because data migrations cover kind of two distinct areas. So in part one, we'll be talking about using the Excel, sort of the day-to-day kind of end user types of integration that people can just use the Excel integration to upload data and what the different options are there. And then in part two, will be a little bit more technical. It'll be not necessarily for an IT person or a developers person, but it's the tool that we use to upload data directly to the table structures when we're configuring your system. And there's some really maybe interesting use cases for clients to use that as well. And we do have some clients that like to be able to update their master data on a mass scale. And so that's the tool. So we'll kind of look at that tool as well, how to use that. So keep an eye out on our calendar. I think that's coming up in 3 or 4 weeks. So we will we'll be running that second session. So for today, we're just going to go in and we're going to look at these 3 different areas where we can do data migration. And so data migration is maybe a little bit of a big word. That's probably more relevant to part 2. So think of this as just sort of a data upload feature. Could be one record, could be many records. It's totally up to you and how you decide to kind of build these, but this is really the day-to-day type of activities you might be doing in the system. So I'm going to go from sort of most common to probably least common. Journal voucher upload. So this is the Excel journal voucher upload. You would use this to get your data in the system, your journal entries into the system, and a lot of our clients use this, a lot of users use this. So there are some significant advantages to using the Excel integration versus keying a journal entry directly into SAP ByDesign. So some of those advantages are it's got many of the same features as the voucher interface, the manually keyed in screen. So you don't really have limitations there. So that's a great feature. It's easy to save and reuse the template each month. So while you could create recurring journal entries inside SAP ByDesign, depending on the nature of the entry, depending on maybe the fact that you might want to modify it each month, it could be easier to just have it as a flat Excel file that you just store in a folder on your computer, and each month you go in and you just run all of those journals that you want to upload each month. And where that really works well is where the recurring values change each month. So a ByDesign recurring entry, think maybe a static dollar value, so you're maybe drawing down on a prepaid each month. That works well to keep that in ByDesign. But if you're trying to do something a bit more sophisticated, like maybe book a loan payment, where you've got principal and interest and some sort of declining balance, and you have some sort of amortization schedule, you could have that inside Excel, and then you could link a journal entry to it to sort of bring in your values easily. So that's where that journal feature works well in Excel. And on that subject, you can, because it's in Excel, you can link it to spreadsheets, tables, tabs. So that gives you all sorts of enhanced flexibility. So you can, create your journal voucher uploads to feed off of formulas or VLOOKUPs, store data in other tabs to support your entry. And then the next one we'll look at is the budget planning upload. So actually, unlike the other two, this is the only way to create budgets in Excel. So if you are going to be using budget planning, this is the tool you need to use. But by the same token, it also works well for linking to planning spreadsheets. So a lot of times budgeting and planning is fairly sophisticated depending on your organization. maybe you have a lot of calculations that are feeding into your budget numbers, like head counts or square footages and things like that. So that could be information you're keeping in planning sheets, and those could all funnel into a budget upload sheet to upload your annual budget. And then lastly, we'll look at the accounts payable invoice upload. And I would say this is probably the most uncommonly used. There's a specific reason for that. So there is flexibility here to upload data that comes to you in an already electronic way. So that's the real benefit. So think if you're getting a credit card statement, something like that, and you've got a lot of details electronically from your supplier, this could be a useful feature. It has pretty much the same error handling and controls as putting an invoice in manually through the screen, and it has the ability to review inside ByDesign prior to posting it, which is a good feature in my mind. And then it works well for sort of monthly repeatable sort of once the mechanics of laying out and parsing the data is completed. So we'll talk about that. This is where we're sort of running into the one frustrating limitation with this, that if you can overcome that, and you've sort of got a repeatable process, you'll probably like this feature. So stay tuned for that. We're gonna have a look at each of these. So I've got a couple of, just a few screenshots, because each one of these kind of work off the same way that you're gonna download a template. So I'm gonna show you where to go in and get that template. I'm gonna show you how to fill it out. And then you're gonna use the SAP ByDesign add-on in Excel to upload it. If there's anybody in the room that does not know what I'm talking about, SAP ByDesign add-on for Excel, please drop a question in, because I would be happy to talk about that for a moment, but I'm going to assume otherwise that you have that already downloaded and installed. And once you run that journal voucher upload, you're going to end up with a actual just journal entry left in the system. And that process works fairly similar for each of these three different areas. So these are all specific templates. So same thing with the accounts payable one. I'm going to show you where to go get that template. You can see in the bottom right, there's sort of a screenshot of what it looks like. So you're going to populate it in Excel, and then you're going to do the upload feature to get the document in. And the budget planning works pretty much the same way. So you're going to have all the templates look different, because of course the data and the functionality is very different from each one of these features. So they all have a dedicated template, but I will show you where to go and get those. So without further ado, let's maybe pop in the system and have a look at that. So let's start with I'm going to go down into my yellow area. You're looking for the general ledger, and we're going to go into the journal entry voucher view, which is the screen where you can sort of research and see all of the journal entries that have been posted in the system. And in here, there is a new button. And so from here, you can click on Microsoft Journal Entry Voucher from Excel. So this is the way you create one in the screen. You're probably familiar with this. These are all the fields. Most of these fields are going to be available to you through the Excel upload. So that's the way to get to the manual data entry screen. And conversely, if we want to do it in Excel, we just click on this, and you're going to get a little bar at the bottom where it's going to down. There we go. So I'm going to get my pop-up bar at the bottom. And depending what browser you use, you're going to have to look for the downloaded file. If you are not seeing a downloaded file, do check your message bar. Usually it's up in your URL. You might get a little red stop sign or something. So you may have a pop-up blocker turned on by default in your browser. I'm sure you're familiar with those. So you might have to turn off pop-ups for the My SAP website. And then once you've successfully downloaded the file, you will get a template that looks like this. So kind of very, very pale white spreadsheet, which has the ability now to tie into SAP ByDesign directly through the SAP Business ByDesign add-on for Excel. So once again, if anybody's not sure how to get this add-on or where, feel free to ask me a question. I'd be happy to show you. So assuming you have that add-on installed, you will be able to log on and connect directly to your environment. And now your spreadsheet is dynamically connected to SAP ByDesign. So this same add-on works for reports if you're used to using that. If you're running an SAP report, you can see the ribbon looks different. So an upload ribbon looks very compacted like this. If you're looking at the reporting ribbon where you're running reports in SAP, it's a great big long ribbon with lots of other data in it, but it's all running through the same add-on. So for our little test today, I kind of gonna do a little cooking show. I'm gonna pull the half-baked cake out of the oven. So I'm gonna just switch over to a different, it's the exact same Excel spreadsheet, but where I've pre-populated the data just to save us some time. And so I've gone in here and I've populated all of the information that I want to fill in for my journal entry. And the feature that you have here is the ability to look up, if relevant, data back into your system. So if you're not sure what GL account, you can click on the lookup and you will get a pop-up box with whatever value you have to fill in. And so that works for your company field, your set of books, currency, things like that. So if you're not sure, the syntax does need to be correct. So if you're not sure which company number it is, it's going to have to be the numeric identifier, not the name, things like that. So it's a good idea to use the lookup the first few times you're using this to kind of get an idea how the data is populated in here. And just a little note, this lookup, it can be a little bit buggy sometimes, I think, with the Excel add-on. So if it ever pops up and it's blank, typically I just hit the enter key on my keyboard or the search button, and then usually it fills with the values. So if you are noticing anything wiggy like that, sometimes you have to maybe try it a couple times. But then you should get your list of values. See, it might come up like that with a blank, and then you can, hit it again to get all of your values. There you go. So look at me, I'm triggering the bugs already. So I actually want to avoid doing my pop-up because I've already got values. So you can put in some text information here. So maybe this relates to, monthly prepaid accrual. You can put, because you have the ability to use Excel features, I can do Control-C, Control-V. So I can paste in multiple places. I could even write a formula in here if I wanted to. Or I could reference off-table or off-page resources as well. And that's where the power of Excel really comes in. So in this case, I've just done a very simple voucher, and it will enforce, you may get an error if you load this with insufficient data. So for example, if you have settings in your system that indicate a P&L account requires a cost center, you're going to have to fill it out. If you try and do the upload and you neglect to put in that information, you'll get a pop-up and it'll tell you that there's a problem and what's missing. And just to comment on the header here, so very similar to the header inside the system, you could target a specific set of books. If you leave a field blank, it's going to book to all of your set of books within that company. If you are using one of the other journal entry types, so I'm not going to get into a long discussion on that today, but if you're doing a journal entry to adjust the payables or receivables subledger, those are specific journal entry types in SAP ByDesign. Or you're wanting to do a reversing entry, that's a specific journal entry type, and then it would require you to put in the offset posting date for the reversal. So if you're doing some sort of an accrual, you could absolutely do that. And then sort of from most relevant to least relevant, they have included a bunch of columns here for other information that is available on the journal entry screen, but probably not very commonly used. Once again, kind of depends on that journal entry type. But most commonly, you do have to put in a cost center, a project, or a profit center if you're hitting a revenue account. So I would say, column 7, 8, 14, commonly populated. And if it's balance sheet, you could leave all of those blank, like I did in row 8. So let's just run this to see what happens. I am already connected, I believe, if I haven't lost my connection. So I'm just going to do a save data to. Incorrect binding element for posting date. Okay, so I don't know why I'm having an issue with my posting date. Oh, I think I accidentally copied that in there. So my apologies. So we're going to do a 407, 2021. And it could be that I have this date format the wrong way. So we'll try that. Okay, well, that's not going well. Let's actually try this format we have up here, 2021/04/-7. There we go. So maybe in a way that was a good thing to happen. So kind of gives you an idea of some of the challenges you run into because you are still dealing with Excel, right? And as we know, Excel has specific formats for dates and things like that. So it could be a little bit of a trial and error to get things to go through the first time. But the great thing is once you've sort of set it up, you can save this Excel spreadsheet just like I have and reuse it as often as you want. So I'm going to go back into SAP for a moment, and we're going to go back to our general ledger, and we're going to just invoke our list of all of our journal entry vouchers. So I'm going to refresh, and we can see now that it came in as the most recent one, so 710. You can see where I put in this header text, monthly prepaid accrual. Those are the amounts that I did. So everything that I've done in here is just completely brought in from the Excel version. Now, I see one question about, can you put attachments onto journal uploads? So when it comes to attachments, you can't upload an attachment from Excel, but you can go into a posted journal entry and you can get to the attachments tab, and you could, at this point, let me go into the edit screen. Let's go to the attachments. And then I have the ability to do my add button. So at this point, I could upload an attachment if I wanted to. So that is possible. Other than that, pretty much every field is locked down because it's a posted entry. So that's pretty much the only thing that you could do. If there was a problem with the entry, you could reverse it here. So not an issue for that. Maybe one other thing I would add is if you do have journal voucher controls in place, so for example, you're a user who cannot post journals, you could still use the upload feature, but it would come in as unposted, and then the user that is allowed to do the posting could go in and post it. There is no ability to kind of load it as unposted. That is something that if you have the ability to post, the Excel journal entry is going to do it automatically for you. So that's the Excel features. Maybe one other thing I would just add, so keep in mind, once again, if you're looking at this template, it's very easy to add tabs and work with regular Excel. So for example, what I find easier if I'm having, my Alex template that I like to use each month, what I like to do is actually export the GL chart of accounts onto this tab, make this my list of accounts. And then rather than using the lookup in here, which is maybe a little bit slower, it's really easy for me to go into my list of accounts and quickly see I've got all the names and things like that. I could have tabs that have supporting information. So like I mentioned, an amortization schedule for your loan interest or something like that. And then you could have your debits and credits could be essentially VLOOKUPs or some sort of a formula to go retrieve that information. And that's really the power of using the Excel upload. Okay, so next on our list, we're going to go into the budget and planning one next, because that's probably the second most commonly used. So if you are doing budgets and planning in ByDesign, and we could probably do a more in-depth workshop just on it, but I'm going to focus today just specifically on how to do the upload feature. So I have a number of different budgets you can see sitting here. That's what these tiles are. And when I want to upload a budget into the system, I have to do a Excel version. So this works exactly the same as the other one. If I click on this, you're going to get the pop-up and you're going to get your blank Excel template. So once again, just to save us a bit of time, I already have a pre-populated template. So I'm just going to bring it up. So when you download your empty template, obviously there's no data in here. You have to fill in the header information. So up to you how you're going to name this plan. And really, that is I mean, they're calling it a plan version, but it's a specific budget that you're uploading to the system. And we're setting up a unique budget for this set of books and this currency. And I will also mention that there are two different templates. So you could do one for multiple companies and you could do one for single companies. And those templates look slightly different. So when we go into here and we say we want to download, this is where you would choose which one you want. So you're going to do income statements separate from your balance sheet. And then you decide if you want to load multiple companies or if you want to load a single company and have that single company as its own plan budget. So that really varies depending on how you're going to do financial reporting in the system, how you're planning to kind of manage those reports. No specific, I mean, big difference in the two, except if you are loading the company, the sole company budget, you get your accounting periods across the columns. In this one, because we're loading multiple companies, they have put the companies down every single row. So if I was to load more than one company, I would, go company 1000, 2000, etc. But because of that extra dimension, they've put the accounting period in each row. So it just means formatting your budget a little different for the purpose of uploading it. So before I hit the upload on this budget, I do have a feature here that says overwrite all records, set as default. So if I have this turned on, this is the difference between am I updating an existing budget or am I overwriting the whole budget and loading this one up as a replacement. Now, I'm going to pop back into the system here because I had done a test and we've already loaded this. So just to kind of prove that we're loading one from new, I'm going to just trash this budget. So I can just go in here and delete a plan. Doesn't matter. There's no journal entries or anything associated with budgets. Budgets are just a value sitting based on GL account and org units. So at any point in time, you can remove it. So I'm going to go back now into the system, into the Excel, and I'm going to use my save data. So I've updated a bunch of information. I've populated, a number of periods. So I think we just went as far as period 5 here to kind of show you different GL accounts. Now, cost center, profit center, I didn't bother populating this, but obviously if you are running profit cost center financial reporting, you're going to want to populate. You could duplicate this same row, same GL account across all your different cost centers, or if it's a revenue account, across all your profit centers. So if you have a question on that, please let me know, but I hope that's clear. Okay, so I'm invoking the upload button. Once again, you have to make sure you're logged in. I'm still logged in from before. It's telling me there's a record successfully uploaded. So I'm just going to go back to my screen. I'm going to hit the refresh, and we can see that it has brought in our budget. And if we drill down on this, we can go in and we can look at this budget. So there is a general tab, which just shows us some basic header information on when it was created, which company it relates to. You could add descriptions and things like that to this. But the plan data is what we're really after. And so here you can see, because this view is really periods across the columns, it's converted that data to look that way. So all of those same GL accounts you saw, it's now putting it in our January through March period because those are the periods I've loaded. If you want to do sort of a deeper dive into this, you've got a couple of default views that you can switch to. So pivoting on cost center, things like that. As you recall, I didn't load a cost center with this budget, so that report's not that interesting. I can also go into the analyze data, and it'll just drill me right into some of the budget, into the financial plan detail report. But now I have access to customize my selections and views. So of course, just standard SAP ByDesign reporting here. I could go in and add whatever information is interesting to me in this report. So once again, I didn't populate cost center, but this will show you which company, so arrange this report as you like. And that becomes your analysis of your loaded budget. If there's any questions on that, so I see one question, how do we create variations on budgets, or can we modify the budget? Yeah, so that's actually totally up to you. So if we go back to our budget screen, you can see here that I do have 3 different budgets loaded into this system. So I can create as many budgets as I want. I could also go back and I could modify a budget. So I would do that by using that Excel spreadsheet, by making my changes and then choosing this option off to say I don't want to necessarily overwrite, I just want to modify. So I could essentially append, change rows. I could get rid of all the rows I don't want to touch. So that's one way of doing it. But typically, if you have sort of a board approved budget, chances are you just want a revised budget, right? Maybe you're in Q3 now, your budget targets are no longer relevant. So what I typically see is people will take this spreadsheet, go in here, and they'll just create a new budget, right? So this might be the Q3 modified. They give it a new name, change all of your numbers. And this one, it doesn't really matter because I don't have anything to overwrite. It's brand new. And you can just upload your data that way. And the nice thing about this is you've got that initial budget still intact in the system. So we can go back here, and then when you decide to do your financial reporting, I'm not sure why I'm not seeing it. Well, maybe that'll take a second to load, but it will create just another panel here. And then when you go to run your financial reports, you will have, you can run your actuals compared to any one of these budget versions that you want. So either way to do that. Okay, so let's keep moving. We're going to go into the AP upload. So for that one, we're going to go up into our purple area. We're going to go into our supplier invoicing. We're going to go to our list of invoices and credit memos. So here's where you would go to do your maintenance on your invoices, kind of see where things are at, search on your documents. And from here, you also have, this is where you do your maintenance screen, my bad, of your supplier invoicing. But there's a different view for doing your invoice entry. So this is invoice entries off of purchase orders. And in here, you have the option to do an import from Microsoft Excel. So that is where you go to find that Excel template and download it to your personal computer. And the assumption here is you're going to be doing a freestanding invoice that doesn't involve a goods receipt or a purchase order. So let's go have a look at this template. Full transparency, this is my least favorite template. I'm not super happy with the way SAP designed this, and you're probably going to roll your eyes in a moment. So let me tell you what they did. They've created a supplier invoice template that allows you for loading multiple rows to your AP invoice. But what they're forcing you to do is put your data in separate columns for the second row. So this is essentially item 1 or row 1 of your invoice. And if you want a second row on your invoice, you have to go all the way over to column 69 and start entering that information that's going to be modified for that particular row. So in this case, that makes this template definitely unwieldy to use. Not impossible, but unwieldy, because probably if you are getting data that is more than 1 row per invoice, that is going to be a challenge for you. You may have to work on some Excel macros to kind of convert that data from, because they probably will send it to you sort of top down, right? Like with multiple rows underneath each other, and you're going to have to run some sort of Excel macro or formulas to convert it. So depending on your Excel skills, may impact your decision whether this is usable or not for you. But regardless, I'll demonstrate it for you because there are a few applications where it may make sense. So I've previously uploaded this data to the system just to test it ahead of time. So I'm going to just upload this one again. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of this document ID. So this field you actually leave blank because that's assigned by SAP. Same way as when you post a document or save a document, it automatically assigns a number to it. So you don't need to populate that in the spreadsheet. It'll actually self-populate once the upload is successful. So I'm going to load that one. And because the system will actually kind of bark at me for duplicates, I'm going to take the supplier's invoice number, which you probably know in SAP is called the external document ID. We're just going to change this number. So we'll just make it something completely different. And I will leave these amounts. And one thing that I'm going to load a 2-row one, so you can just see that that is how it works. So you can go over to the right for a long ways. How you populate this data here, I've got a bunch of hidden columns on that first one, but we can go see it here. So you can kind of build this out how you want to work. I mean, if you're very familiar with the SAP ByDesign, AP data entry screen, you'll recognize these fields, right? This is the information. And as you know in SAP, you have multiple ways to input an invoice, right? Do you want it to have product categories? Do you want it to have a product type? Do you want to just, are you going to do the math to have the quantity times unit equals your net price? The tax calculations. So this all becomes a little bit of a project at first if you are setting this up kind of with a supplier sending you some sort of electronic data to figure out how you're going to populate this so it loads. And the good thing is you can test this easily. It doesn't post the invoice, so you could do it in a test environment, but even if you did it in production, you could actually delete these invoices without posting them. So it's just a matter of playing with it to get it loaded correctly. And then you're going to have the same sort of error handling that the AP data entry screen gives you. If you're keying into a P&L account that requires a cost center or project code, you'll want to populate that on the template, or else you're going to get some sort of an error. So you can see quite a few different fields here that are available for you to populate information depending on what your requirement is. I'm just doing a simplified version. The other thing I'm doing is I'm actually built a little error into this one. So I've got my quantity as 2 and my net price is 10. So 2 times 10 does not equal 2,000, but I'm going to leave that error in here to just sort of show you how the system kind of handles that. So you saw when we had a date error in the Excel one, it actually just sort of stopped us. It made us fix it in Excel. That's not necessarily the way it's going to work in this supplier invoice upload. So I'll show you what I mean. Okay, I changed that number. I got rid of that, so we should be good to go. We're just going to try uploading this. Always have my fingers crossed. Is this going to work? It worked an hour ago, so it should work now. While this is green barring, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. Comments, observations, do you love it, do you hate it? If you tell me you hate all of the rows side by side, I will totally agree with you. Okay, so you can see as it's saving, it's kind of doing some stuff here, like it's sort of going through and it's like looking at all these rows. I just loaded one invoice. It's actually come back now and it's populated the 2181. So it tells me that it's essentially got a document ID. Therefore, I know something has happened inside SAP. And it's also giving me a little preview of the error. So it's a warning error. It didn't block me from loading it, but it is telling me so exactly what I was talking about. So the system is going, $20 is 10 times 2. I don't know where you got $2,000 from. So it's giving me some advance notice. And at this point, I can deal with that inside SAP. So I'm going to go into our supplier invoicing. I'm going to go to our invoice and credit memo view. This is where I took you the first time. And so 2181 is the document number that we retrieved. And it will always load these documents as in process. So it's never going to load a posted document. This is a good thing because if there is an error, even if there isn't an error, you may want to go in and just validate your work. If you're really confident that this worked, you can always do the shift select if you've got multiple invoices and post them all at once. So it's not a big deal to post them afterwards. In our case, we're happy to go in because we know we have a problem. So I'm just going to go down and check out this invoice and see that, oh, you know what, there was a problem in the data. It actually should have been 1,000, not 10. So that's going to sort of sort out my math there. So I'm going to run the check on this now and make sure there's no errors. So it's telling me that exception was dealt with. So I'm really ready to post. At this point, all the rest of the features are there. So I could simulate the journal entry. I could load an attachment. I could literally modify the invoice in any way that I want. So that data upload file could have been a foundation for something that you then want to modify in here, all up to you, whatever you could imagine. So if I'm satisfied with this document, I will post it. And that is my successfully posted. So where is this feature useful? As I said, probably if your data, where it's useful is if you have one row invoices. So one practical application, for example, might be credit card handling. So I think a lot of people are doing credit card handling through a clearing account in their GL, right? They might just have a credit card GL account. The problem with that is it gets a little bit, you're kind of reconciling it outside the system, right? Your debits and your credits to kind of clear out that credit card clearing. So if you were using this, you could maybe import all of your credit card transactions rather than put all your transactions across, all of those columns like we have here. I would just put every single credit card transaction as its own AP invoice and load it all to a supplier, right, to the same supplier. And that's how I would reconcile my credit cards. So just to expand on that, I mean, we could do probably a whole Q&A cafe on that alone. But if I were to go into my payable supplier accounts, I think I did some of this before. So I have an example where I was playing around with credit card clearing. So credit card maybe automatically gets paid out of your bank account, but typically the challenge is typically the challenge is the payment happens and you're just chasing people down, right, to find out what the charge was for. So maybe you have them sitting in here as things you uploaded as all of the dollar amounts based on, the credit card statement. And all you have to do is go into each one and just code it because you're waiting for it, right? And then you could use the clear manually button here to clear it against the payment out of the bank. So you could kind of use the supplier account as your, open transaction handling, chasing down your employees that you're waiting for them to tell you what the charge was for. And then also the ones that are kind of straddling the month end that you're just going to leave sitting in accounts payable until the next month's automatic payment comes out. So that's just one example where I think this could be useful. You probably have your own in mind if you have other suppliers that are sending you electronic data, how you could use it. So I see one question, is there a limit to the number of rows that we can upload? Yes, well, that is implied from this spreadsheet. So if I go over to the right, it goes over to like column 1286. So you can see in the brackets there, that's actually telling us which row these fields relate to. So this is telling us that it can load 30 rows because there's 30 columns, or 30 times all the fields for columns. So item 30, a long way over to the right, that's the maximum number of rows that you could load. I assume if you replicate this data like cut and paste, it probably won't work. So I would say fairly safely that that's the maximum you could do, and then you'd have to look at another invoice. But once again, if that's what your goal is, you're going to be doing lots of macros and things like that to kind of pivot that data to get it all into a single row for an invoice. So I would think about, is this something I'm actually going to pay to the supplier? Am I just using it internally for clearing? Could I just have multiple transactions that I'm clearing against some sort of a internal debit credit against payables? All depends on the application you're using. Okay, so I'm just going to take a deep breath, see if there's any other questions appearing. Now's the chance if there's anything else you can think of. Otherwise, I guess we'll wrap there. So thank you everybody for joining this cafe on how to do those migrations. Feel free to join again if you want to understand the more master data update migrations that we can be doing through the backend tool in a few weeks. I'll hand it back to Catherine.
Great, thanks, Alex. Thanks so much for hosting. As always, a fantastic Q&A cafe, and thanks everyone for attending. As Alex had said, please make sure that if you have any questions afterwards, you can always send them to us. And also, don't forget to join us next week. That's Wednesday, April the 14th at noon Mountain Time for our next iteration in our project management series. Again, thanks so much for attending. Thanks, Alex, for hosting, and we'll see you next week.